My fascination with interurban began when I was 2 or 3 years old, when my father would bring me out here on the interurban to Riverton, to his favorite fishing hole. And it was fascinating to see these big green cars on this high trestle. Here in the Seattle area, we don't have anything like that anymore.
Billed as the quickest, safest, most convenient way to go, the high-speed interurban electric railway traveled along a 38-mile track connecting the two largest cities in the Northwest. The Seattle-Tacoma Interurban rolled into operation in 1902 and continued for the next 26 years. It was a force for change that forever altered the landscape, commerce, and culture of Western Washington. Yet today it is remembered personally by only a handful of Northwest locals.
I started collecting pictures in 1948 when I became acquainted with several fellows that had the same interest, and we shared everything. I would drive miles and miles just to look at one picture. I've been collecting steadily ever since.
The electric railway's passenger and freight service brought promises of growth and development. Operating for years with little competition, the interurban fulfilled its promises, and the vast valleys that stretched between the twin cities of Tacoma and Seattle prospered. As the century of steam faded into the past, the 1900s ushered in the century of electricity. In the first few years of this new era, the Wright brothers flew the first powered airplane, ragtime jazz developed in the South, the first motor cars rolled off Ford's production line, and only 1 in every 57 people in the United States had a telephone. Along the shores of the Puget Sound, the city of Seattle developed into the metropolis of the Northwest. Known for its deep water harbor, shipyards, sawmills, and salmon fishing, the young city had a solid foundation that promised growth. When news spread that 3 tons of gold had been unearthed in Alaska, droves of prospectors flooded into Seattle. From 1900 to 1910, the city's population tripled to 240,000. Nightly entertainment prospered, giving Seattle a reputation as a thoroughly alive and energetic Western city. The Third Avenue Theater offered music, comedy, and drama for 25 cents a show. For the same price, you could see the Seattle Indians play the Tacoma Tigers. Rivals in commerce as well as in sports, the city of Tacoma took great pride in its selection as the West Coast terminus for the Northern Pacific Railroad line. Fertile valleys and dense forests surrounded the city. Tacoma's commercial industries thrived and its population doubled. While visiting the city, a young journalist named Rudyard Kipling remarked, "It is a town smitten by a boom of the boomiest." With the rapid development of both cities, an efficient means of transportation was an absolute necessity. Between 1888 and 1903, 9 streetcar railways were built in Seattle, extending to West Seattle, Queen Anne, Rainier Valley, and as far north as Green Lake. Steamboats traveling from Elliott Bay to Commencement Bay offered the only reasonable transportation between Seattle and Tacoma. The Flyer, the Tacoma, and the Indianapolis made 4 trips a day, but made no stops to the communities in between and took close to 2 hours. While streetcars provided mobility within the cities, no single means of transportation traversed the sparsely populated farmland between Seattle and Tacoma. As the automobile was still a novelty for the rich, farmers had to rely on horse and wagon to get their produce to the city. Over dirt roads that were muddy and often flooded, the ride began as early as 3 a.m. to reach the market before it opened. For most of the 35,000 residents in the White River Valley, life was nearly isolated from all that the big cities had to offer. Now that the residents of Seattle and Tacoma were familiar with riding streetcars, the time was right for a passenger railway that linked the Twin Cities and all the communities in between. In 1899, permission to build the link between Seattle and Tacoma was granted to Henry Busey, a well-respected attorney and Tacoma industrialist. Busey, well aware of the railway's economic potential, incorporated the Seattle-Tacoma Interurban Railway Company and mapped a path between the twin cities of the Puget Sound. The general plan was to run the line out of Seattle's Pioneer Square, through the Duwamish and White River valleys, then head west to its terminus off Pacific Avenue in downtown Tacoma. Construction began in March of 1900 and would require approximately 2 years and $500,000 to complete.
Seattle Mail and Herald, 1901. The new electric line in time will completely change the populace of the lower White River Valley. The opium dream of the Seattle-Tacoma Railway Company will soon be realized. The Seattle end of the road is already graded some distance, and I am creditably informed the Tacoma end is keeping pace.
Laying down track on the mostly flat valley land presented few construction problems, allowing crews to work efficiently. That is, when they had the materials.
The road has been in course of building for the past 2.5 years. Many delays have been experienced by officials on account of the difficulty in getting rails and materials from eastern shops. The Daily Ledger, 1902.
They built the interurban down through the valley, and it was fairly easy going. It was level. But when they got down southwest of Auburn, it started up on a grade, and then they had to tunnel for 800 feet through the hill. They started running into financial difficulties, and he stopped working. It was hard going, and the contractor ran out of funds, and then he died suddenly.
Without the means to pay for these delays, Henry Busey was forced to sell his railway to Stone & Webster, a Boston firm which owned many of the nation's streetcar systems. The line was renamed the Puget Sound Electric Railway, and another $5.5 million was raised to finish its construction. By the turn of the century, modern cities began to harness a new form of energy called electricity. Power to operate the Seattle end of the Interurban Railway was generated by the Post Street station in Pioneer Square and sent to substations in Georgetown, Kent, and Milton. Above city streets, power lines provided electricity to streetcars by long poles known as trolleys. Outside the cities, a shoe on the motor cars would connect with an electrified third rail built alongside the two standard rails. Built by the J.G. Brill Company in Philadelphia, the motor cars were the finest modern electric cars available. Each could carry 44 people comfortably and travel at speeds greater than 45 miles an hour.
The first cars came into Georgetown Car Barn by Northern Pacific flat cars. The interior of the cars were beautiful. They had mahogany woodwork. The seats were rattan. They had brass handles on the aisle side of each seat, so the seat could be turned back. People would be facing the way the train was running.
It was fair and warm on the morning of September 25, 1902, when local mayors, business leaders, dignitaries, and officials gathered to christen the inaugural run of the Puget Sound Electric Railway. Commuters and curiosity seekers stood 3 deep in line, filling the shiny green cars to capacity.
The Tacoma Daily Ledger. At precisely the hour of 6:45 o'clock, conductor Charles H. Steese sang out, "All aboard," and with the sibilant hiss from the air brakes and a shriek from the whistle, car number 502 slowly started from the waiting station at the corner of 7th and A Street. The Tacoma-Seattle Interurban Line was officially open for public travel.
The people of the small towns in the country are taking eagerly to the new road. At almost every station pass, there could be seen a little group watching to see the first train roll by, and they greeted its appearance with waving of handkerchiefs and other expressions of approval.
The fact that many of the small towns were so hard to reach has no doubt impeded their growth, but now that they are placed within minutes of the larger cities, their populations are sure to increase.